I've been talking about the US government funding opposition groups here involved in the anti-government protests in Thailand. And I've been focusing on the National Endowment for Democracy because right on their own website, they list all the core organizations involved in these protests and the dollar amounts of US government money that they receive. This evidence is impossible to deny. And so we've gone from the protest leaders claiming that they aren't funded by anyone, and especially not by foreign governments, to admitting that, yes, the NED is funding them, but it's okay because the US government is just trying to fund democracy and freedom and human rights in Thailand. But I'm about to show you that the National Endowment for Democracy has about as much to do with democracy as the illegal US invasion of Iraq, codenamed Iraqi Freedom, had to do with actually bringing freedom to Iraq. And it's as easy as just going to the National Endowment for Democracy's own website under About and Who We Are and looking at their board of directors. These are not people who have dedicated their lives to advancing human rights and democracy around the globe. These are people who played direct roles in promoting and even executing illegal invasions like in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, the attempted overthrow of the Venezuelan government, and the ongoing conflict between the US and Iran. And we'll just pick Elliot Abrams because he's the most explicit example of this. If you go to his profile here on the NED website, it says that he's on leave. He's on leave because US President Donald Trump picked him to not only overthrow the government of Iran, but also to overthrow the government of Venezuela. And in this headline from the London Guardian, it says, U.S. diplomat convicted over Iran-Contra appointed special envoy for Venezuela, and his goal is to promote this man named Juan Guaido, who the U.S. just picked and declared president of Venezuela. He wasn't elected. Nobody voted for him. They just declared him president of Venezuela. This is not democracy. This is foreign interference. This is U.S.-backed regime change in Venezuela. And if we look through the article and we try to see, like, what sort of association does Elliot Abrams have with human rights? And we come down to this paragraph right here. Abrams is widely remembered in Central America, but particularly from his time in the Reagan administration when he tried to whitewash a massacre of 1,000 men, women, and children by U.S.-funded death squads in El Salvador when he was Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights. Why would the NED have somebody like this on their board of directors if their mission was actually to promote democracy and defend human rights around the globe? Next, we have Ambassador Victoria Newlands. She's also on the board of directors. Her affiliation is Center for a New American Security. And if you go and you look at the list of the people who fund this organization, it's all weapon companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. It's also big banks like Citigroup, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. It's also giant oil companies like ExxonMobil. These are not companies that come to mind when we think about advancing human rights and democracy. These are companies and organizations that come to mind when we think of those who abuse and suppress democracy and human rights the most around the globe. And Victoria Newlands' actual public life, her service, included this from Reuters. Leaked audio reveals embarrassing U.S. exchange on Ukraine, EU. This article is from 2014. This was when the U.S. was overthrowing the Ukrainian government. An audio clip was revealed that had her handpicking the government they wanted to replace. Weighing in on the makeup of the next Ukrainian government is the obligation of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian people alone, not a U.S. government official. So here is just another example of someone on the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy involved in regime change in another country around the globe. We have George Weigel. He's on the board of directors. This is his 2003 article, The Just War Case for the War. This is about trying to promote the illegal U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. He says, I believe that a compelling case can be made for using proportionate and discriminate armed force to disarm Iraq. Of course, disarm Iraq of chemical and biological weapons that the US, even at the time, knew Iraq didn't have. It was a lie that served as a pretext for an illegal invasion that killed 1 million people and has left the country in chaos ever since. We have Scott Carpenter also on the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy. He actually directly participated in the invasion and occupation of Iraq. He was part of the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq. And what this was this government, this fake government that the US created, consisting of Americans who were just running the country because they murdered the Iraqi government and they hadn't handpicked a puppet government of Iraqis to run by proxy yet. This is modern day imperialism. This is not promoting democracy or human rights. And of course, the US invasion of Iraq was one of the worst crimes against humanity of the 21st century. And Scott Carpenter, on the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy, was directly involved in that. We also have Senator Tim Kaine. He's also on the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy, and he has been promoting war in Syria. And even though it looks like he's opposed to this, he just wanted Trump to ask Congress so that Congress could get credit and input on destroying Syria as well. Here's another statement by Tim Kaine on his official website complaining about the US withdrawing its troops from its illegal invasion of Syria. So there you have it. These are the people that the Thai opposition is taking money from. These are people who are involved in the worst crimes against humanity of the 21st century. They hide behind ideas like democracy, protecting human rights around the globe, when they're actually the ones who are attacking democracy and destroying human rights around the globe. So please keep this in mind. Just remember, the protest leaders went from denying that they were getting US government funding to making excuses for receiving US government funding. Now we have to look at who these organizations are, what they're really doing around the globe, and what that means for Thailand, because these people have been involved in the destruction of Iraq, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen. They've also been behind the riots in Hong Kong. They helped overthrow the government in Ukraine. They're involved in unrest in Venezuela. They've been trying to undermine and overthrow the government of Iran for decades. What do you think their plan is for Thailand? Do you think Thailand is the first country that they've come to that they actually want to help and improve? All of the references are in the video description below. Please like and share the video if you thought it was helpful, and please subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and thank you for watching.